Now, programming from the Illinois Channel, an independent, nonpartisan corporation formed to provide nonpartisan coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois. For more information on the Illinois Channel, please visit our website at www.illinoischannel.org.
Just ahead, we sit down with Sheila Weinberg, the founder and CEO of the Institute for Truth in Accounting, which examines state spending and budgeting issues, and talk about why she started the organization, as well as the cost to Illinois taxpayers for state spending and whether or not there is a point Illinois goes over the financial cliff. Then in about 30 minutes from now, we head to the Union League Club of Chicago for a panel hosted by AARP titled Building Wealth in Communities of Color, Who is Impacted by Work and Save? And finally, in about 1 hour and 35 minutes from now, we head to Scott Air Force Base for the ribbon-cutting ceremony of a national cybersecurity facility. Speakers include Governor Rauner and Senator Dick Durbin. That's all just ahead, after a brief word from one of our advisory council members.
Hi, I'm Don Schaefer, Executive Vice President of Midwest Truckers Association. We represent over 2,700 member companies in 15 states who operate in Illinois. These men and women are responsible for keeping the food in your store, the fuel at your gas station, and bringing the books to your schools. In fact, look around the house and virtually everything you see will have been moved at one time or another by a truck. That's why our issues are your issues. Whether it's the taxes they pay, the price of fuel, or the regulations truckers must endure, in the end, you, the consumer, pay the price. That's one reason why I'm proud to serve on the Illinois Channel Advisory Council. Just as truckers deliver the goods on our nation's highways, the Illinois Channel delivers the information you need on your information highway. The Illinois Channel reaches 1.4 million cable homes across the state, as well as making their programming available as a video stream on their website at illinoischannel.org. Delivering the goods is Midwest Truckers' business. Delivering the information you need to stay connected to the actions of state government, that's the Illinois Channel's business. The Illinois Channel, it works for all of us.
Next from Springfield, we sit down with Sheila Weinberg, the founder and CEO of the Institute for Truth in Accounting, which examines state spending and budgeting issues, and talk about why she started the organization, as well as the cost to Illinois taxpayers for state spending and whether or not there is a point Illinois goes over the financial cliff. This runs about 30 minutes.
Sheila Weinberg, thanks for joining us again on the Illinois Channel.
Oh, thanks for having me again, Terry.
It's been a while. It's good to see you, but sadly, our economy is, and our state finances are no better off since the last time we spoke. You run Truth in Accounting, and tell us just briefly, what was the motivation for starting it? You had a problem, I know from one of our prior conversations on camera, that you weren't trusting the numbers that the government puts out, either at the federal level or at the state level. Is that more or less the...
Yeah, that's right. And, I started it over, honestly, the 2000 presidential election when I realized that there was a lot of debate on, I don't know if you remember, Bush was saying, hey, I'm going to return this surplus. Remember, there were surpluses as far as the eye could see we had back then. And Bush was going to return it to the American public in the form of a tax cut, and Gore was going to put it in the lockbox. And I'd studied the federal budget, and I understood that there really wasn't a surplus. In fact, if you handled Social Security at that point as like a private corporation would handle a pension, we were actually running a $500 billion deficit just in that one program. So instead of talking about this, fictitious surplus, and the debt was going up at the same time while we were running a surplus, which I didn't quite understand. We should have been talking about, hey, the baby boomers are coming up, retiring, what are we going to do about that? But we were focused on the wrong thing because we had the wrong numbers. And so once the election happened, I'm like, let me get this straight. We just elected the leader of the largest financial organization in the world, the federal government, of the United States based upon the wrong numbers. And I'm not a complainer, I'm a doer. I really felt that I needed to educate the public about the true numbers and try to get the governments to start to produce them.
So 16 years later, one of the really interesting things that you've developed is a website, and you call it, what is it, datalabs.org?
It's called statedatalab.org. It's a sister website to our truthandaccounting.org website. And what we did is we got to that by, every time that I spoke on the federal financial problems and how they budgeted poorly, people in Illinois here would say, well, if you think the feds are doing bad, you should see the state of Illinois. So we studied the books of the state of Illinois, i.e. they were telling us every year that they were balancing the budget. So the public thought, hey, well, everything's fine. They must be spending within their means because they're meeting the constitutional requirement to balance the budget. But we found that they were not including a lot of their employee compensation costs. They weren't including the pensions that employees were earning every single year, and that the state was incurring that compensation every cost, and they weren't including the retiree health care cost. And in addition to that, to make it even worse, they weren't including those liabilities on their balance sheets. The pension liability or the retiree health care liability. So we felt that citizens and their elected leaders were making financial decisions not knowing the true numbers. So we took it upon ourselves to calculate the true financial condition of not just Illinois, but every single state in the state. And from that we developed something called the taxpayer burden. So we took, here's the assets of the state, here's the liabilities, and how much money do you need to pay those bills? And we divided that by the number of taxpayers in every state to come up with what we call taxpayer burden. And the taxpayer burden represents the amount that each taxpayer in the state is going to have to send down to Springfield. In this case, Illinois, right now, we have a $45,500 taxpayer burden. So each
per citizen, which means even if you're 5 years old, that's your burden.
We actually call it's called a taxpayer burden. So it is actually
by taxpayers.
It is taxpayers.
Okay, not per capita.
Not per capita.
Okay.
And that's $45,000, $500 per taxpayers. So, but those taxpayers are going to have to pay that amount of taxes in the future, and they're not going to receive any goods or services for those taxes. So in Illinois, it's $45,500. New Jersey's actually worse, and Connecticut's actually worse than Illinois. But once we developed this taxpayer burden and started to compare states, people would say, well, you're not looking at a whole picture. For example, Connecticut would have a higher GDP than Louisiana, or they might have higher median income. So, you're not looking at everything and we're like, oh my God, we have a large enough study. Do we need to include that in our study? So what we did, though, is we developed a website because we couldn't find one. There was no website where an ordinary citizen could go in and say, how is my state doing compared to another state? How do we have more people leaving the state? Do we have more attorneys in the state? Which state is the best to do business in? There was no website to do that. So we developed something called statedatalab.org, a sister website to our truthandaccounting.org, where citizens can go on and they can generate charts. They can go select Illinois, Wisconsin, say, hey, maybe if you're thinking of moving, you could select Texas. Is Texas doing better than Illinois? Which state's doing better? And then you can generate a chart that shows you exactly what's going on and how to compare those states.
So as we look at Illinois, you said it was $45,000, but per taxpayer. What is the actual pension deficit right now? That's a number we often hear, but I don't know that we typically get an accurate number. Do you know what the accurate number?
We use the numbers that the state's actuaries calculate. Yeah. So we look at their assets that each pension plan has available, and then the benefits that they have promised. And that number, the unfunded pension liability, is $118 billion at this point in time. So that's part of the $212 billion that we include in calculating how much money is needed to pay the state's bills.
Now that money, the $118 billion, that would be needed to pay those pension benefits, but obviously not all like next year. So over what period of time would those be needed? You've done like a life expectancy on the recipients?
Well,
or?
the actual, we don't calculate the
Not
numbers. We
personally,
actually use the state's actuaries calculate them. So it is over the lifetime of the employees how much you're going to have to pay. But I must emphasize, this is the amount that they have incurred to date. This is the amount they've already promised. This isn't talking about how much employees are going to get earn in the future. This is how much they've just incurred to date. So it's similar to a business. Looking at a business, if the state of Illinois shut down today, it would have to come up with $118 billion just to pay the benefits that have been incurred to date and earned to date. So those numbers will just continue to rise unless more assets are provided to reduce that unfunded liability.
And that's just one of our unfunded liabilities. There's the health care costs and other things. What would you say is the state of Illinois, not legally, but practically bankrupt?
Well, it depends on your definition of bankrupt. It's not, as you say, it's not legally bankrupt, but the Webster Dictionary definition of bankrupt is where an entity does not have enough money to pay the bills that they have. So obviously Illinois is $184 billion short of assets available to pay the bills that they have accumulated to date. So under that definition, the state of Illinois is bankrupt. The great thing that we have this year, which we haven't had in the past, is that the state's balance sheet finally is reporting the net pension liability. It is reporting the liability of the state. Previously, about more than 50% of the pension liability was hidden off of its balance sheet. We worked for years at Truth in Accounting to get the Governmental Accounting Standards Board to require the state and other states to put their pension liability on their balance sheet, and this year that liability, if you go to the state's audited financial report, you will see it. Now, but also, even in addition, you can go to your own local government and see theirs. So I can go to my village of Glencoe and finally see how much pension liability Glencoe has, how much Naperville has, how much the city of Chicago has. So it's greater transparency for the citizens. And in 2 years, the governments are also going to have to put their retiree health care liabilities on the face of their balance sheets. So
in 2 years?
In 2 years. So in 2 years, they'll have a full picture. But this year, exciting for us accountants, I don't know if it's exciting for other people, the pension liability is finally on the face of the government's balance sheet.
What are the taxpayers? I mean, here in a democracy, we're supposed to make decisions based on, hopefully, solid information, which is what you're providing. What are we to make of it? I mean, the average person is going to hear, I'm not going to put $45,000 toward the state of Illinois to pay their bills. I mean, I can hardly pay my bills.
Well, one thing that they should do is, they should, what Thomas Jefferson once said is, that an informed electorate is the basis of a sound democracy. Well, unfortunately, we have a misinformed electorate. So citizens do need to get themselves more informed about this. When you hear the governor or the legislatures or the mayor or your local officials say, we are balancing our budgets, you just go ahead and say, no, you're not including all the cost. So I guess what they can do is be very skeptical about the information that they're getting provided and demand that, no, you need to include all the costs when you balance your budget. Because what it's allowed them to do here in Illinois is expand the government beyond what the citizens are willing to pay for, because the citizens haven't known the true cost of the government. So that's a problem.
Do you talk to legislators and counsel them on this when there's some proposal before the state, or do you just counsel them and say, here's what you're facing?
Well, what we do is we counsel them on here's what you're facing, the $184 billion financial hole. But we also counsel them on something called fact-based budgeting, which is full accrual calculations and techniques. The IRS doesn't allow corporations to do if you make more than $5 million, you can't do your books using cash basis or checkbook accounting. But that's how the state does its billions of dollars of budget. It does it on a checkbook basis. So what that means is, okay, the state's constitution says it's only money in and money out, okay? So specifically, the state's constitution has a constitutional requirement to balance the budget. So, but what it says is your funds available have to equal your expenditures. So, if you borrow money, that becomes available for you to spend. And it only says expenditures. So you'll hear a lot about these unpaid bills. Well, this is a function of this definition of expenditures. So again, it's only the checks you write. So if you get a invoice from your vendor and you don't write the check for it, you don't have to include that in your balanced budget requirement. So these are the games they play. And the other thing is that
even though you have a drawer full of bills, you have $1 billion worth of bills.
Well, in Illinois, we're up to I think about $9 billion
of unpaid bills.
This drawer is full of $9 billion of bills, and the comptroller's job has pretty much become sort of like, if you don't have enough money to pay your bills, it's like, okay, I have this $9 billion of bills. Which one? I only have X amount of revenues. Which revenue? Which are we going to pay? So we recommend fact-based budgeting. Go ahead and include all your costs in your budget, and all your expenses and all the invoices that you've gotten, and also only include the revenue that you've earned. You cannot include loan proceeds as revenue if you're truly balancing your budget. So we're encouraging the state to do that and local governments to do that. Honestly, we've had a really hard pull in Illinois to get legislators to do that because they would be using the truthful numbers to balance the budget. And they come back to us and say, Sheila, we can't balance the budget using the bad numbers. Why do you think why would we want, there's no way we could do it using the good numbers. So what we've said is, okay, go ahead and balance the budget any crazy way you want to, but before you pass the budget, go ahead and do a pro forma income statement and a pro forma balance sheet. What are those going to look like once this budget has been enacted? So for example, this year's financial statements for 2016 will probably show
for the state
will probably show between a $4 to $9 billion deficit. Well, that would have been good to know before we pass, quote, a balanced budget. You go ahead and pretend you're balanced, but before you pass it, let's go ahead and figure out the reality of what it is.
Now, have you looked at Chicago as well? As far as
we have looked at Chicago. I can't remember the newest numbers off the top of the head. The numbers I remember is when we did them a couple years ago, and that was $28,000 per taxpayer. So
if you're a resident of Chicago, you have that $28,000 on top of the $45,000.
Yeah, and then we did Cook County, which was about $3,000. The Chicago Public Schools, and that I think was about $19,000, and then you have to add the state on top of that. Altogether, the last time we calculated, it was more than $78,000 per taxpayer in the if you're living
in Cook County in Chicago.
Yes. So and again, these are taxes you're going to have to pay, and you're not going to receive any goods or services for those.
Because that's going to pay maybe someone to be retired in Florida.
Right. And you're saying, well, I can't really do that, I'm not going to pay that, da-da-da-da. Well, again, when the mayor comes out and says, I've balanced the budget, or CPS comes out and says, we've balanced the budget, you need to ask them, well, okay, the mayor, you've told us every single year that you've balanced the budget. Your $1 to $3 billion, your audited financial statements show that you're $1 to $3 billion in deficit, even though you keep on telling us you balance the budget. Are you going to really balance the budget this year, or are you just pretending that you're balancing the budget? And one of the reasons that Chicago's in horrible shape is, again, just like Illinois, the pensions. But the mayor has only been paying 1/3 to 1/4 of what he should have into the pension plan. So it's kind of like you complaining to me, well, I'm in horrible financial shape. Well, you haven't even been paying the minimum on your credit card, okay? So he's not been paying the minimum on the pension, the city's pension credit card.
The pensions, both at the state and at the city of Chicago level, and any number of other places, am I correct in saying the real issue there was that they weren't making a large enough contribution? People would say, well, we wouldn't have had a problem with the state pensions if they had been making their payments all along. I tend to think they would have had a problem anyway, that their contributions weren't really large enough to match the size of the benefits. Am I right on that?
You would not have an unfunded liability of $818 billion.
No, but you would not that high.
If they were making the contributions to match the pensions. You know, so two things that they did is, one, each year, you know, it's not, you know, this is rocket science, but they do have rocket scientists to calculate how much you should put into the pensions. And the actuaries told them every single year, here's how much you should put in, and every single year they did not put enough in. And then some years they did like benefit enhancements, so they even increased the liability larger than what it should be, what it was in the past, but they didn't fund it. They just said, here, you know, here, have employees have all these benefits, but they didn't put any money aside to pay for those benefits.
How do we stop those in government service from doing this, from basically bankrupting our communities or our state?
Well, one, we would say go ahead and require fact-based budgeting. You know, include only the revenues that you earn, include all your expenses. Go ahead and make sure those pensions and retiree health. Right now, state and local governments do not fund those retiree health care benefits. So the employees, they promise them to the employees, but they don't include any money set aside to pay those. Well, go ahead, and we would say your budget really isn't balanced if you're not setting money aside to pay those. So go ahead and require that your budgets be really balanced, including pre-funding your retiree health care benefits, including the proper amount into your pension into your pension plans. Let's get started that way. And then I always tell people, you know, truth in accounting, we don't have any like, oh, here's the silver bullet to fix this. But what I tell people is we have a cash shortfall. In Illinois, we have $184 billion cash shortfall. The only way to fix that is to bring more money in or take less money out of the system. And so be careful when there's reforms that are being proposed in the state. A lot of times they have a tendency to do the opposite. You know, there'll be tax cuts, which would bring less money into the state, or there might be benefit enhancements, which would require more money to go out. But so keep in mind when all these politicians are spouting, hey, here's how I'm going to fix it. Does that bring more money into the system, or does it take less money out? And if it doesn't do one of those two, then they're really not fixing the problem. They're making it worse.
When you look at, I don't know if you have an opinion of it, but when Governor Rauner was saying, I mean, he would argue if you cut certain taxes, or maybe he would even say if you just cut regulations, that would lower the cost of doing business for business. And that the only way for us to dig ourselves out of this hole is not to tax our way out with you could do some new taxes, but the size of the problem is so big that you really just need to be able to grow the economy, create more jobs,
right?
Or have people move their businesses to Illinois. Do you have an opinion on whether he's right on that?
Well, again, if you grow the economy, you get more tax revenue in, you're obviously bringing more money into the system. You know, there does need to be analysis that, yes, the things that are being proposed would actually bring more business into the state and generate more income taxes. There does need to be an analysis, and we haven't done that analysis. We'll leave that up to other people.
Have you done an analysis of when is the day of reckoning? Because we've been hearing about this crisis that's been coming at us, both at the state level, the city of Chicago level, and the federal government's going to have a problem with its retirements and with Social Security as well. Is there a point at which we go over the financial cliff?
I believe here in Illinois, it's when when the lenders just say enough already. We're not going to lend you any more money, and the state will have to miss a payroll. Until then, I would say that we're already there, though. We're already there. So, for example, we're not paying bills on time. We don't have enough money to pay our bills today. We're in essence bankrupt today. And this is costing us today. So for example, the interest on the vendor bills. So if the state doesn't pay a vendor bill on time, which remember we have $8 to $9 billion hiding in a drawer, those earn interest.
I believe it's 12%.
Yeah, it's 12%, 1% every single month. Well, in 2013, that was $323 million that we had to pay on interest alone, and I'm sure it's going to be higher this year in 2016. So I think that's a crisis that we're spending that much on interest. There's been a time where we went out and tried to borrow money. Well, we couldn't borrow money. The market said at that interest rate, we're not going to lend you money. So therefore, we had to go back, do some pension reform, which was overturned. But so now the borrowing market is actually doing policy for us, and that seems, that's a crisis to me. And so there's many things that are going on right now that are already a crisis. That, oh yeah, the doors are not shut down. Vendors aren't being paid. School districts aren't getting paid. Universities aren't getting paid. For some of those people, that is a major crisis. Okay, there was a cute story. I don't know if it's cute, but in the paper recently about one of the state legislators driving for Uber. My state rep was renting an office space that a former state representative had. It was more expensive, further away from his house, but he couldn't move to a cheaper place because the new landlord would not take a lease from the state because they didn't want to wait for 12 to 18 months to get paid. His children and other state employees, they have to have cash in order to use medical facilities because, again, those medical facilities won't wait the 12 to 18 months to get paid. So we're already in crisis. Nonprofits are going out of business. We're in crisis in Illinois. Just because we have enough tax revenue for the comptroller to go, okay, well, I have $184 billion of bills. I have $200 million of cash, so I'm going to pay, such and such. Just because we can still do that doesn't mean that we're not in crisis.
We just avoided a crisis, at least an immediate crisis, when they passed a funding bill because we had some municipalities that were lending money to the state and the state wasn't paying its water bill or its electricity bill for things like prisons, and they were going to cut the state off and cut the water off to the prisons. So, I mean, it could hardly be more dire. If you were the governor, what would you do?
Well, what I would do again is, pass fact-based budgeting right away. At least, let's go ahead and tell the public where we're at, where we truly are or aren't balancing the budget. And then, you'd have to come up with proposals to either bring more money in or take less money out. Truth in accounting, we're not specific about that because hey, here's the numbers. Once you guys figure out the problem, hopefully this will make you realize that you have a problem and you will work on it. If we went ahead and said, well, you need to, say, raise taxes or cut spending in order to fix this, then people would say, oh, your numbers just look really bad, just so you can, get your agenda passed. And we don't want to be accused of that. We're just neutral accountants. Here's the numbers. You guys know the facts. Fortunately, you're asking me what we can do about it, and I always claim victory at that point that, oh, well, now you understand the situation, and I've succeeded in my mission. We'll leave it up to other people to figure out the specifics on how to fix it.
All right, well, I wish it was better news, but we appreciate all the work that you've done to really inform the public about the dire future we face, and maybe the lawmakers will listen and come up with some specifics.
And Illinois again was ranked the third worst state in the union last year. In September, we're coming out with a new financial state of the state. Watch for that on our Truth in Accounting.
September, you say?
Yes, in our Truth in Accounting and our State Data Lab. And then we have a great new exciting pension website where you'll be able to compare Illinois' pensions to other states. That'll be a new exciting part of our website.
And I should have added before we close out, you look at some of the other states. You don't look at just Illinois.
We do a financial state of the states. So we look at every single state. We do a financial state of Illinois, financial state of Indiana, financial state of Wisconsin for every single state. We did a financial state of Puerto Rico. And we do a financial state of the United States government. So, which you think things here in Illinois are bad, those are also bad news from that arena.
The reason I was going to say that is we look around, Illinois is among the worst, maybe the worst example or in certain categories. But so many states have similar problems, whether they are to the extent that we have or not. I wonder to what extent, again, what is the future of the national economy with these states having such economic impact if at more or less the same period of time they get to the point where they just can't pay their bills?
Right, and theoretically states can't go bankrupt. Are they expecting a federal bailout? What are they, we sort of say, well, maybe they are expecting a federal bailout because they're not doing things to fix things, they don't have plan B, so maybe plan B is a bailout. But there's been already laws introduced in Congress says no, we're not bailing out. We do have 11 states last year that did have what we call a taxpayer surplus. They didn't have a burden. They actually have extra money for.
What are they doing right?
Well, they actually, they only include the right revenue. They don't include loan proceeds in their and they pay their bills when they incur them. They fund their pensions. A lot of them are.
And they accurately project their revenue and then base their spending according to revenue.
Yes, they actually truly balance their budget, and so a lot of them are oil-rich, natural resources rich. Were so it's going to be interesting to see how how much
the oil
that's going to
revenue is really dropping off.
Yeah, how much that's going to affect them. But they just a lot of them okay, we're going to have pensions, but we're going to fund them. We're going to be required to fund them. Hopefully we can get Illinois and those other states to at least start to realize that, because if they don't fund it, we haven't been able to have enough information to hold our elected officials accountable. Again, they've actually been giving us more government than we've been paying for. And so, if, for example, here in Illinois, we would have had to raise taxes to fund these pensions in the past, to cover the pension compensation part, would all of those people continue to get reelected? We'll never know, because we weren't given enough information to even make an eligible decision on who to vote for.
One of my criticisms among the media is that so many of them are financially illiterate and they can't follow some of these financial discussions when they're covering the government. Do you ever work with media organizations, or what would you advise those who are going in to cover government about what numbers matter and what should they pay attention to?
Well, what they should pay attention is to the audited financial statements. The budgets are, honestly, at Truth in Accounting, we do not study budgets because they're just political mumbo jumbo, and you just chase your tail around, and this number, that number, and this fund and that funded, and so we ignore them. We say, go ahead and look at your audited financial statements. And that's why we encourage, before the budget's passed, that's usually this thick, just on the top of it, put a 2-page balance sheet and income statement. Work with the auditors and the people who prepare the audited financial statements using good standards, and recast the budget using that. But instead of the political mumbo jumbo. But so hopefully we can have legislators and citizens start to do that instead of the craziness that they're doing now.
All right, well, Sheila Weinberg, we appreciate you joining us.
Well, thanks for having me again, Terry.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Matt Hart, Executive Director of the Illinois Trucking Association. For over 80 years, we've represented the interests of those who work in the Illinois trucking industry. We work with members of the legislature to pass laws to help make the roads safer, to help keep Illinois trucking competitive, and to help provide ongoing educational opportunities for those in our industry. The technology of trucking is forever changing. So too are the laws regulating the trucking industry. That's why the Illinois Trucking Association is proud to support the work of the Illinois Channel, which keeps citizens around Illinois connected to what's happening in state government and what changes are being discussed that will impact their families, their communities, their future. And the Illinois Channel gives those of us in industry an opportunity to share our thoughts on public policy with our fellow citizens across Illinois. I'm Matt Hart, Executive Director of the Illinois Trucking Association. I'm also proud to serve on the Illinois Channel's Advisory Council on Transportation. The Illinois Channel, it works for all of us.
Next from Chicago, we head to the Union League Club of Chicago for a panel hosted by AARP titled Building Wealth in Communities of Color, Who is Impacted by Work and Save? This runs about 1 hour.
Several months ago, we had an internal discussion about work and save and our work across AARP. And it was compelling to me that very few organizations recognize that while we talk in numbers, 55 million, X percentage of people without access to save for their future. Very few have focused in on what is a huge challenge, and I want to acknowledge the great comments of Senator Biss this morning because there are so many people behind the numbers we'll talk about throughout this conference, but I think even more compelling is that it speaks volumes about the disparities in this country related to access to income, access to savings, and access to really a secure future for everyone. Our CEO, Joanne Jenkins, recently published a book entitled Disrupt Aging. And one of my favorite parts of that book was dedicated to the 4 freedoms that we all need in order to have a secure retirement in this country. And one that she outlined was the freedom to choose. And choice is more than an attitude. Choice is also income related, the ability to have the savings to be able to live the life you want to live. And I'm so pleased to have my colleagues here today so you can not only see and hear from them, and you've already heard their impressive bios, but also learn a little bit more about the initiatives that they're leading and how those relate to what we've been talking about here today. So my first question is a question to each of the panelists, and Jim, maybe you can start us off to speak a little bit about your role at AARP and even more your vision thing for how we move forward for communities of color.
Great. Well, thank you, Elaine, and good morning, everyone. Just a few words about my role at AARP and kind of where I see us going. Like Yvette, I started at AARP just 7 months ago, in early January. And my role is really to develop and implement our outreach strategy and our strategy for greater impact in African American communities. And so when I started here 7 months ago, I learned quickly that there was some good news to tell. First of all, African Americans see AARP quite favorably. They're very aware of AARP. They feel that AARP is quite relevant. So all of our data shows very positive things in all of those regards. The challenge that we've seen, and the challenge that really drives my strategy, is around the fact that we see of the three major multicultural audiences represented here, African Americans have the lowest retention rate in terms of membership at AARP. And so when I think about that, I think that's saying to us that we have a very positive sort of relationship with African Americans, but we can go deeper when it comes to our community presence and engagement. And so my strategy this year is all about engaging through national partnerships with national faith-based denominations, national Greek organizations, fraternities and sororities, civil rights organizations, ethnic media, community development organizations, all focusing on issues of importance and priority to African Americans. And also showing up at events where these partners are having their largest national convenings. We want to be there. We want to be there in meaningful ways, offering relevant programs and initiatives that speak to the priorities of African Americans and that speak to health, wealth, and self. In the area of health, very focused on caregiving. Caregiving is a major issue for African Americans. We have had several several workshops around caregiving at national events. We've developed a caregiving documentary that focuses on 4 African American jazz artists, 3 of whom are caregivers. The 4th is now being cared for. We have featured the health tracker that's offered by our colleagues on the programs team of AARP, the health tracker at our booth activations at various conferences, so people can get information around nutrition and getting more sleep and having greater health, better health behaviors. With regard to wealth, we just over the weekend sponsored a workshop at the National Urban League on the issue of small business and entrepreneurship in terms of how small business owners can manage their personal finances while growing their small businesses. And so we're very much focused on the small business aspect of African American community because we know that's a major interest. And then lastly, I'll just say quickly, with regard to self, we have begun to really implement disrupt aging as part of our messaging in the African American community. We've had several workshops with African American celebrities, actually, who have talked about how their careers have changed over time and how they've really continued to live life to the fullest and live out and build out their careers over time, really disrupting aging in that sense. So I'll just stop there and just say those are some of the things we're doing around engaging and being more present and being more culturally relevant and culturally sensitive in the African American community.
Great. Yvette, I know you're also new to AARP, but have hit the ground running. Talk to us a little bit about the work that you're doing and also your vision for our outreach to the Hispanic Latino communities.
Sure. First of all, thank you for the invitation. Good morning and buenos dias. These 7 months at AARP have been quite the challenge, and I am so open for new challenges. Challenging because when we look at our data, unlike with the African American community, Hispanics don't know who AARP is, right? Although the multicultural team that was there before our team has been out there in the community doing certain efforts, Hispanics don't understand the great social mission that AARP brings to their community. AARP is not relevant to them. So wow, what a challenge, right? All of this work, all of these state teams doing things to really impact their communities, yet people do not know who we are. So that is a challenge. So I really had to take a look with the different teams and the data that we had at what was going on. So relevance is something that's very important because Hispanics, when you look at them, it's the whole level of acculturation, right? They're at different stages in their life. How do you connect with households? Because in the Hispanic market, it's not just a 50 plus, but think about the multi-generational households where everyone at different age ranges has an impact. Caregivers are not 50 years old in the Hispanic community. They are younger, and they're the ones taking care of the parents and the abuelitos, the grandparents. So really taking a deep dive and understanding who is this target? What is it that they need? How do we talk to Hispanics in a relevant way, no matter what age they are in a household? And so the strategy that I'm exercising this year is driving awareness. So we have awareness metrics in a relevant way, because you have to speak to them. If you speak to them in Spanish, it has to be relevant. If you talk to the biculturals, bilingual, the information has to be relevant. What is relevant to me in the life stage that we are? And so one thing that was also missing was consistency of messaging and consistency of funding. You can't come in and out, in and out, in and out, and not see an impact. And so I was able to state the case, have a budget to be able to run a brand campaign on a national level with some local market overlay to augment the great work that's already being done in the States by a lot of people that are here, and some that are out there right now driving causes like the ones that you've seen on the slides. I mean, when you look at this type of data, there is so much to be done. And so how do you speak to Hispanics in a relevant way? Jim mentioned health, wealth, and self. How do you bring that to life and win the hearts and minds of Hispanics? And so we came up with salud, dinero, y amor, which is a Hispanic truth. Anybody who knows Spanish knows that when you toast and you say salud, you really mean salud, dinero, y amor, health, wealth, and love. So we've taken that truth, which is something that are a part of people's lives, and that is how we're serving up AARP to the Hispanic community in a relevant way, really focusing on the things that matter, the caregiving, the financial security, disrupt aging, but bringing it to them in a very relevant way through a very comprehensive marketing plan where we are on Telemundo, on Univision, on YouTube, on Hulu. It is an amazing plan to really win the hearts and minds of Hispanics, no matter where they are on that level of acculturation. So my vision is to win the hearts and minds of Latinos across the United States and Puerto Rico, because we're also doing a lot of efforts. Puerto Rico is an aging population, and we have to help the aging population. We have to help the mass exodus when they're going to Orlando, when they're going to Connecticut, when they're going to New York, when they're going to Pennsylvania. How does the work that we do impact those families, both in Puerto Rico and in the United States? So that's some of the work that I've been leading in the 7 months that I've been here. It's been a totally collaborative effort. There are many faces here in the room that I've worked with that have had impact already. And I look to work with everyone here, AARP and non-AARP, to really make things happen and change those numbers. I mean, some of these charts and some of the numbers that we've seen are pretty hard to swallow, but we can't sit here and just look at the slides, right? We have to take action as a team, joining these great causes that AARP has, because juntos es posible, our new tagline, together it is possible.
Thank you. Daphne, talk a little bit about your work and your vision.
Great. Well, thank you. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
First of all, I want to really thank Elaine for her tremendous leadership of bringing the multicultural voices to the table, especially in the policy arena, and also to Jerry as well. We're so pleased to be able to start this partnership internally now, really infusing the multicultural communities into especially the policy and advocacy work. And so I'm so pleased that we're able to do that. So for the Asian American Pacific Islander audience, what I'm trying to do is really take what AARP's work is as to what we do for all. And when that all means all of us, right? And so for the AAPI community, as many of you may know, 2/3 of our community are immigrants. And so with that come already a lot of challenges. So I have two strategies. I have an internal within the AARP strategy, and I have an external strategy. I'll talk about the external one first. For our community, really, APIs have really come into the U.S. after 1965 and very recent too, and a lot of them are immigrants. Many of them are still monolingual as well. We are really focused on raising awareness as well too within our community. And as you know, there are so many different Asian American Pacific Islander ethnic groups. And so we have focused on very specifically the two largest ones at first, which are the Chinese and the Filipino communities. Within that, there are two very different strategies. First of all, because the Filipino American community, for the most part, are English speaking, but we're able to communicate them in culturally relevant ways by using Taglish, Tagalog, and English. for the most part in English. And so for the Filipino community, we're being able to have a lot of traction. In the Chinese American community, we are working more with a lot of the bilingual materials, trying to translate, trying to transcreate a lot of the AARP materials that would become relevant for the Chinese community. So these are our first two target communities that we are working in. And as well, too, for our community, for the most part, we don't know who AARP is. Unfortunately, like any other community, if they do know anything about AARP, the first thing we get is, oh, you're an insurance agency, what are you selling us? And this happened to us last week when we were in Denver, when we did a caregiving session for the Chinese American community. Afterwards, people came up to me and said, well, we thought you were coming here to sell us something. And so so now I'm going to start off every session saying we're not here to sell, we are here to educate and inform. But so for us, it's really raising awareness about what AARP has to offer. And I often say into our community, too, it's very difficult. First of all, we're trying to educate what AARP really, truly is. But then also, really, when we talk about it, AARP's issues that we're addressing are really taboo issues in the Asian American community. We're talking about really end-of-life issues. We never talk about that among the family dining table. We never talk about wealth. So this topic is very relevant because we never talk about money, we never talk about finances at the dinner table. And health, first of all, health is very private. We don't talk about that either. So all this health, wealth, and self, right? For our own community, we just don't talk about. So we've got to start breaking down taboos. And so this is where we are moving efforts in. Overall, I'm really trying to position everything under the caregiving umbrella. We realize that caregiving, the importance of preparing to care, is so relevant. The Asian American community is not talking about it at all. And yet it's so, it hits every single one of us. And this is where we are doing all the education around, going to put it underneath that caregiving umbrella, whether it's a health, and wellness issues, whether it's a financial component to that, and just really the self as well, too. And we're seeing a lot of good traction in that regard. I'll say that on the internal side within the AARP, as Jerry mentioned earlier, as we all know, there really are hardly any statistics within about the Asian American Pacific Islander community. We are always listed as other, which were on those slides, whether it's in the wealth arena, whether it's in voter statistics, whatever it might be. And so for our role in the President's Commission on Asian American Pacific Islanders, the two policy issues that we've been hammering away for the last 8 years, every meeting I go to with federal agencies, and whatever agency it might be, whether it's Department of Labor, Health and Human Services, whatever the agency is, it is how important it is to collect data and then disaggregate the data for our community. It is so critical that we get Hmong community statistics, Vietnamese, Native Hawaiian, and it's not Asian American Pacific Islander as a lump. We have got to break it down because within each of those ethnic groups, the situations are extremely different. And it's very stark because once we start to do that, you'll see. And so the other, I'll say the second policy issue is language access. As I mentioned in the beginning, 2/3 of our community are immigrants. That means that for them, English is not necessarily the first, they're not fluent in English, and so everything really needs to be translated and transcreated. So those are two overarching policy issues for the Asian American community as a whole. But for AARP, that means the research that we do, we also need to really start to break down and disaggregate data. So on the policy side and the thought leadership side for AARP, one of the things that we've been trying to do is first of all find out what data AARP has already that we can already disseminate to the public. It's not going to help us if we can just keep it within AARP, but if we can really share that. So one of the first things I did, I've been with AARP about 3 years, we created with our research team at AARP, there are 3 research reports on Asian American Pacific Islanders 50 plus. We have copies of these available at AARP. If you want them, let me know. It's also on our website as well. But 3 of them, one of them is called Are Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders Financially Secure? actually I should have said financially insecure, because actually this breaks down the whole model minority myth about Asian American Pacific Islanders. And that myth is that we're all highly educated, that we all went to the top institutions of higher ed, that we're all extremely well-to-do, and that we basically have no social ills and no social problems, and so we don't need any assistance. But this actually breaks down, it's census data, but some of it's also AARP data that we've collected and has a lot of good information, especially for this topic. The other report is on AAPI's 50 plus and caregiving, and the other one is on AAPI's 50 plus and health access. So being able to create and produce and disseminate more research is really very, very important. The other component of that is really to help support and work in partnership with Asian American Pacific Islander organizations that are on the ground that are doing research as well. So there is a infographic in your packet there. We partner with the Coalition for Asian Pacific American Community Development. They just came out a report where they were able to survey their coalition partners, and most of them are serving lower income AAPIs. But this one and this full report, I would really encourage you to download it as well. Findings on financial security for AAPI seniors and their families, which is extremely relevant for this conversation today. Yeah. So thank you.
Great, great. And I said to Daphne earlier that I went to AAPI University and speaking to Daphne to really fully understand the complexity of the community. And I think Jim, Yvette, and Daphne raised one common theme, which is how do you speak to communities about the work we do and the challenges to connect them to savings at work. So I want to shift things a bit and talk a little bit about Work and Save specifically. So you know, Jerry's presentation, 6 states have already moved forward in enacting Work and Save. Shout out to those states. Now it's not only the enactment, but it's keeping it real. How do you effectively connect communities, employees to that vehicle to save? So a 2-part question. So first round will be really to talk a little bit about messaging to the individual. We know Maryland was the latest to enact Work and Save. If you're going into Maryland and you're trying to say, this is what you need to know about the importance of this new law and how to take advantage of it, what is your message to communities of color of what they can do to get involved, and individually what people might do to start saving for their future? So Yvette, start us off with some thoughts.
Sure. I think the first thing is education. Just like Daphne meant, these are not topics that Hispanics are discussing over the kitchen table. Usually living beyond their means, these multi-generational homes pooling their money, having them understand that saving now helps them in the future. It helps with their Social Security retirement. I mean, one staggering figure that I still can't fathom is this one. Do you remember this one that came up here? I mean, I just can't believe how people live with $1,335 per month as a Social Security benefit. So really letting people know that saving now affects your Social Security, affects your home, affects your household, affects your mobility, and then speaking to them in an authentic way. Hispanics have an issue with trust. A lot of it is because first generation coming in from Latin America, and they don't know who to trust. So finding that face in the community, that person that's active, to give them that information with the facts. I think once you lay out the facts and you tell them the impact that this type of Work and Save program will have on their lives, they will take advantage, because think about it, they not only help themselves, but they help their families.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Jim,
sure.
Any thoughts?
Yeah, when it comes to African Americans and the whole issue of financial literacy, I think there's a lot of work to be done. We know, for example, that about 20% of African Americans are unbanked, and about 33% are underbanked. So it's saying that, for example, that 20% of African Americans don't have traditional checking and savings accounts, 33% may have an account but are using payday loans, check cashing services. So there's a whole mindset around savings and traditional savings scenarios that just needs to be really reinforced in African Americans. I would also then say that, to Yvette's point, it's important to have trusted advisors in the community who help bring the message to, which is why we work so much with the faith-based community, with the civil rights organizations who are all about economic empowerment, some of the other community development organizations who also have the same messaging. And so I think using those trusted partners to help deliver the message is a major part of the plan. And then I would say that the messaging needs to be sort of aspirational. We find that when it comes to African Americans and financial security, the important point there is that we want to make sure that the message is that you may be down now in terms of debt or not having a lot of savings, but if you take action now, it will get better, that the financial situation will improve. I think those are the types of things that will help to get the message out in a positive way and get people to take action in a way that perhaps they haven't to this point.
Great. Daphne, you talked about the taboo of the AAPI community. No one talks about anything, and apparently is true. That's right. But putting that aside, what should we know about effective messaging to the AAPI community with respect to work and save?
Well, I think actually it's also the messenger is actually more important as well. The message is one thing, but the messenger is really, really critical. As my colleagues have said, they're finding that trusted partner. That's why we're partnering with national organizations, local organizations in the community, because they are able to get the message out. But I would say that for California, I'm so pleased that my good friend, the California State Treasurer, John Chung, is a leading proponent of the Work and Save for California. Boy, John has tremendous credibility and respect in the AAPI community, not only within California, but nationally. So if John comes out to say that this is so important that we start to save, and this is one way to do it, that is going to be a huge messenger who's trusted and known within the broader AAPI community. One thing that we do through a lot of this education, basic education, is also to utilize the ethnic press. Most people in our community still go to the ethnic, whether it's radio, whether it's print, or whether it's TV, and to be able to get people on, to be able to just educate. So those are the two main vehicles for us that we have been utilizing very, very effectively.
Great. So one thing that we know is that 55 million people don't have access to workplace savings. 65% are people of color. Many are working in small businesses. Some are self-employed, who might also benefit. The employer role in this, how key is it? And how should we think about outreach to multicultural organizations or chambers of commerce that might play some role in this? Would that be helpful? Would that be a validator? Your thoughts about that. Yvette, why don't you start off with that?
Sure. I was looking at some data, and it said, why are people excluded? And it's length of employment, not enough hours, and the type of job you're in isn't allowed for this type of program, for this type of 401k. Who is making the law? It's like I was reading, it's like, how is this possible? So yeah, the employer, it's very important even for the employer to be educated about the impact that they can have on the lives. I think it's an education that goes both ways. And I also think that the employees don't know that they have a right, that they have voices to go out and partner with these great organizations, the NCLRs and the LULACs, to go out into the community and have a voice. It's not just sitting down, but being active with the employer, raising the issue, raising your hand. I think that that's very important. People just become complacent. And in the Hispanic market, it's like a cash society. They don't have checking accounts. The money's under the mattress. letting them know that there is a way and that it will help in the future. But I think that dialogue, that two-way dialogue with the employer, bringing organizations also and legislators to talk to the employers, I think it's important. I think that if the employees feel empowered, they can move mountains. And I'm not sure that they feel empowered because they don't even know that this is an option.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you. Jim, any thoughts?
Yeah, this is an initiative, this whole concept around Work and Save is really in the best interests of the employee and the employer. From the perspective of the employer, by offering this sort of benefit, such an impactful benefit, it really will, it's likely to increase the retention rates of their employees, and potentially their recruitment will be bolstered as well. So I think part of the messaging here has to be showing the employer why this is in their best interests. Even though they'll have to take some steps for the implementation, it's actually in their best interest in the long term to be able to offer this, because they'll have that much more retention. They will likely recruit more qualified candidates and have more competition for employees who want to work there. So I just think it's to the benefit of the employer to really take this on.
Great. Daphne, some thoughts?
Yeah, there are 1.5 million AAPI small businesses in the U.S. right now, and so working with those Asian American chambers, which are in every city, is really a very important vehicle to be able to work with those small businesses. And I think that for our community, there needs to be a lot of education, but boy, that definitely is one way to do it.
Right. You know, I was at a conference yesterday, and I was thinking about the win-win-win. There's a win for the individual if they can actually realize the promise of saving early. There's a win for the employer, because our polling has demonstrated that small businesses actually see this as something they want to do, but even more, they see it as a way to retain a quality staff. But also for the financial community. And just a shout out to, I know we have TIAA Craft here, and Legg Mason has been very active in Illinois. We've had Ariel Capital and Cabrera Capital, and so many that have stepped into showing that the financial services industry can benefit from a more diverse complement of savers. Think about it, 55 million people with no savings or access. Think about the economic power and importance of being able to garner that kind of business. So any thoughts about a pitch you might make to the financial services industry that may not even know about this, but may be eligible to offer their services through these state programs?
I would think for the Hispanic market, it's the largest growing minority segment in the United States. The power of these millennials that are in the households. Think about if everyone was educated and everyone had that opportunity. Think about the power of a household in the Hispanic family if everyone was able to save while they worked and also get these benefits. And then the benefit to the employer would be the retention of these people, creating that diversity, and building more of a powerful network within the Hispanic community.
Thank you. Yeah. Jim?
Yeah, I would also say that from a financial institution's perspective, by offering this sort of benefit and really promoting this sort of benefit, you're really raising the overall wealth of the community. And in doing that, it creates more financial opportunities and more financial opportunities for the financial institutions to partner with or to offer to a community of residents who have more assets and have more options. And so I think that's a positive. And I think about the banks, the depositories who might want to be involved in this in some way as a service that even serves their Community Reinvestment Act regulations and requirements as well. So I just think there are a lot of ways that, from a financial institution perspective, that this makes sense.
Well, right now is convention time, so we're all on the convention circuit right now, going from convention to convention. But I would encourage those financial institutions to use those conventions and conferences as an opportunity to hold sessions, information sessions, workshops which would be very, very important. I think the other thing that would be very important to do, I just forgot what I was about to say, but
you've been going to too many conventions.
Yeah, that's right. One of them was conventions.
Yeah,
I'll think about it later.
Okay, great. You know, if you just thinking about messaging to and educating, if you could think of one thing that folks here as well as those who are not with us can do to educate about the power and the empowerment of saving. What one thing would you want to see as a takeaway from this meeting or panel? Jim?
I would want to see the participants here help to spread the word. As an example, we have partners here in the African American community who have quarterly publications that they put out to their memberships, or monthly publications where there could be an opportunity for a newsletter or some other sort of communication vehicle to get the word out, to really ask for and solicit input from their memberships for more questions and more information. So I would just say getting the word out through the various communication vehicles is how I would approach the top priority.
You bet.
I would say awareness. Really keeping this topic alive, keeping it on the agenda, and making sure that you're reaching out to the right teams, the right departments, the right organizations, because it is an important topic, and a lot of people don't know about it. So keeping it on the agenda and educating, it is really what is needed. And then knowing your audience, understanding that you may have to have a Spanish language person talking a Spanish language brochure. You may want to have somebody who's bilingual. You know, Hispanics talk back and forth. How you really communicate the message, and I think keeping the topic alive is really how we're going to make an impact in this area for the Hispanic community.
I think a suggestion might be to actually form an advisory council. It could be a multicultural advisory panel. It could be specific, whether it's African American, Hispanic, Asian American advisory panels, bringing in external community leaders to be able to help inform, but then also to really utilize your internal staff as well too. I'll take the AAPI community, taking the employee resource group, the Asian American Pacific Islander resource group if you have one internally. But utilize your own talent internally as well too.
Great. And the best focus group may indeed be the people you sit next to in the office in terms of how to reach these things. I remember being in our Oregon office and did a community meeting, and I started off thinking, oh my God, what am I going to say to this group of good people who turned out to talk about financial savings and really didn't want to be there, I think. You know, I started by breaking it down saying, you know, these are the 5 worst things I ever did with my money. Because I think there's a sense of insecurity that everybody has. That they don't know how to deal with their money, they don't know how to make money, they don't know how to talk about their money. They know they want money, but it's that engagement, and it's meeting people where they are so that we can really demystify this. It's as simple as saving now, just like I used to do with my Christmas Club account, with my mom walking me to the bank. It's as simple as saving now for the future, and certainly another component which is not getting ripped off by bad choices and bad advice along the way. So I think we have some time for questions of our panel. Anyone want to lead off with a question? Thank you.
Hi, Kate Crowther from Ubiquity Retirement and Savings. So I love the phrase meeting people where they are, and it goes along with what I've noticed and observed as someone in the industry. The conferences that I go to are very often, when you look around the room, white male dominated. There are females sometimes in the room in varying stages of their careers, and I've noticed that they're actually oftentimes the most accomplished women or people in the room, which is great. But when we talk about the 55 million people that don't have access, and you look around the room and you see that that demographic isn't represented, it really makes me question how we feel that we are best situated or prepared to serve that demographic. Are we really meeting people where they are? And what does that even look like? And the employer groups may or may not also be representative of the employees that they have. So I think that there's definitely a disconnection that I would like to definitely address and have a conversation about. And then also to, I'm in policy, and it's really easy to go down the rabbit hole of policy. I enjoy it, I love it, not everybody else does. And we have a lot of knowledge. And especially in the financial services industry, we want to demonstrate that knowledge, but you don't want to overwhelm someone with information. So I'm curious, how do we begin to bridge? I think the advisory group is really great. But again, meeting people where they are, an advisory group doesn't necessarily do that. So I'm just curious thoughts on that.
Great, thank you. And I neglected to give a shout out to Ubiquity, who's really been there for a long time. And thank you for following me in the Twitterverse. Thank you. Yeah.
And it's been a privilege.
Thank you. Don't, you've gone too far now.
Don't forget to roam the dome. Follow her.
I've had great conversations.
Great.
That's great. So thoughts about Kate's question, which is really, how do we speak in a way and make sure that the audiences are hearing us and we're speaking to the right folks to reach those communities?
I think a big way is just the organization that AARP is. We are in every state, and we have these state teams in the local communities partnering with legislators, running advocacy programs. They're just on 24/7, in addition to the volunteers that are out there as well, because without the volunteers, we could not do the work that we do. So I would say, the work that the state teams are doing, along with the volunteers, finding those right programs. And what I had mentioned before is really knowing the audience. Who are you speaking to? Are they, for the Hispanic market, the first generation or the second generation? What are their needs? We have a lot of listening, what we call listening posts, right? Where we listen to what the audiences need. And that is how a lot of the state teams go out and do their work. You really have to listen and understand and then be able to take action. You're right, information overload is not right, but if you serve it up in the right way, then they will understand it.
Great. Any other thoughts, Jim?
Yeah, I would also add that as we go out, I think this is messaging that should be offered not only at financially oriented conferences, but at other events as well. So when we go out and partner with and sponsor a faith-based event or an event with a community development organization or even an African-American fraternity or sorority, we can sponsor workshops to get that word out about this initiative at those sorts of events. Those are national events. And then on top of that, our states, as Yvette mentioned, we have 53 state offices at AARP. We can really integrate that message into what the states are doing. That's already happening to some degree, but that needs to continue. So I just think there are various ways we just have to really keep at it and try to what we've been saying, make sure we go to where the people are and present the message in a way that is digestible and so that people really get the specific benefits without getting into too many complications, just the specific, here are the 4 or 5 reasons why this makes sense. And I think once we get that communicated, then the progress can happen.
Great. Daphne, any thoughts? No. You just don't want to talk about it, is that right?
Time for more questions.
One more question? Yeah.
Hi, good morning. Blanca Castro with the California State Office of AARP. And we are in the middle of trying to get passage of our law that would implement the Work and Save. My question is, in a lot of the focus groups and even some of the outreach and education forums we've had, even the word retirement is something that is not easily understood with the millennials. So my question really to the panel is, how do you talk about work and save when we are talking about long-term? I think I really liked how Jim said, take action now and the situation will improve. You're not even using retirement. So I just offer that from a state perspective, that's where we really need the guidance from all of you.
If you look at our Hispanic campaign, which is on Infonet, and for those of you here on Univision and Telemundo, we don't use the word retirement for anything that we say. So like I said, it's really understanding your audience and serving up the information in a way that's more digestible and it's not negative. Retirement or you're old or you're aging, we don't use those words because it's a turnoff. So what we're trying to do is to help, it's saving, from when you're young all the way to you're old. It's how you phrase it, and we take a lot of time with our agencies and our internal teams to kind of romance the language per se, but you're absolutely right. You need to be relevant, and if you're harsh, they won't read it.
It's also the family, right? For our communities, everything revolves around the family, intergenerational. And so really, putting it back into how it's going to help your family, right? Your children, your grandchildren as well, too. So that's one strategy, is really to put it back into the family. But then also having these multi-generational conversations and dialogues, even around this topic. Everything has to be done with the generation, so you're not targeting just one generation.
Great. One more question? Do we have time for one more?
I'm Randy Paris, and I'm a volunteer with AARP here in Chicago. And speaking specifically to the African American community around savings, insurance has been a large part of what we have been taught to believe in for years, and unfortunately, it is a very deceptive program that has been sold to us by and large. Not just insurance, but savings instruments across the board carry a lot of deception and improper disclosures that often leave people thinking they have something that they don't really have. And I think that's a problem that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, great point. Any comments on that? I think we were talking about trust and we talk about validation, and this question seems to really speak to both.
Sure. I think there is a long-standing sort of trust issue when it comes to African Americans and traditional financial institutions, and you noted this issue of exorbitant fees that have been charged in these situations. I think all the more reason we have to make sure that we partner with financial organizations that have integrity and will not take advantage of consumers who may not have all the information and may not be able to handle all of the specific sort of small prints around the language on some of these initiatives. So we just want to make sure that as we implement things like Work and Save and anything that's related to financial security, we choose the right partners and that we give all consumers the information they need to make informed decisions for themselves. And that's certainly what we would want to do when we try to do here at AARP. Right.
Just one component we didn't discuss, but as a part of these laws that are being passed in the states, there is a test about what I call guardrails, the types of investments that would be offered through Work and Save programs, which speaks to your point, as well as parameters around how many fees they can actually charge. It's one thing to put your money away, but at the back end to see them being eroded by excessive fees is really a downer and deceptive at the same time. So the laws will actually set those kind of guardrails, and I think that's a consumer contribution to be noted in these programs. So I think we're wrapping up the session. No, we're not wrapping up the session. We're taking one more question. Thank you. Thank you.
I promise, just quickly. I'm Jackie Burton. I'm the president of the Conference of National Black Churches, which represents the 8 largest historically black denominations in the country. We partner, and I work as a consultant with Jim in all of their programs. He mentioned that we do sponsorships for a number of national denominational conventions, but I would like to certainly say that to those who are representing financial institutions, there are other ways beyond the national conventions to work at other national levels, okay, and through the leadership of those denominations, and we work from top down, so we can get really easy access to congregations, to jurisdictions. So it doesn't have to be limited to those national conventions, but we have we have really easy access to get, and that's where you're going to meet the African Americans. The church is the strongest institution in our community. So I would just like to offer that as another piece of information.
Great. And thank you so much for being here with us. With that, one more question. My goodness, this is a robust conversation. I think, is this the last? No, we have time to go. Go ahead.
Hi, Jerry Gleepi with the Small Business Majority. Several of you mentioned working with the field with community development organizations and chambers. And I'm curious because I conduct education and outreach with small businesses, one of them being retirement security. And as it was said earlier, we're having some bit of an issue getting people interested in even wanting to participate in an education that has the term retirement in it, and it's essentially what most individuals are seeing across the board. What particular messaging do you shape with the African American, Latino, and Asian Pacific when you're working in partnership with the neighborhood chambers, with the minority chambers, with community development organizations that you find is a little bit different or sort of hits that sweet spot in getting them interested and more prone to act?
I think for us, for the AAPI community, what I want to do is really couch it under the whole caregiving, planning for the long-term care, and because the finances is very much part of that conversation, and since we're now getting their attention around caregiving, that's a whole nother component that's coming up that we need to address.
What I want to do too is I want to do, because this topic isn't that easy and it's hard, if you say it's a work and save event, you're not going to have them, is finding these events that are a bit more fun, right? Where things aren't expected. Like we're doing some things with people in Espanol in New York. It's a festival. It's something that's fun. But you bet your life savers that we will have a financial resilience and we'll have these type of topics in those sessions. And so the attraction is that there's music and there's fun, but there's also education. And so what I'm trying to do is, since I have my strategy of salud, dinero, y amor, talking about all three in unexpected venues, in unexpected events. And where there's music and food, they will come. And so that's a tack that we've been doing, and it's been working pretty well. And we'd like to continue that. We just launched in mid-July, so we'd like to continue that in through next year. So we have gatherings where we can actually speak to people in unexpected venues and give them the information served up, like you mentioned, served up in a way that they'll understand, like salud, dinero, money, piggy bank, hearts, and just with icons, making it simple for them to better connect with this topic that's not discussed at the dinner table.
And I would just add that we all acknowledge that this is not an easy topic to really talk about. People don't necessarily want to get into it, but all the more reason that it's important to be culturally relevant in the way we design these conversations, the content of the conversations, and the way we deliver the information. As an example, this past weekend at the National Urban League, we had our president of AARP Georgia, Lee Baker, present on the issue of managing your personal finances while growing your small business. And he talked about the various stages of growing your business, getting it to the state that you want it to get to, and then talking about transitions and succession plans. Not exactly retirement. We didn't really use the word retirement, but just talked about that next phase. And Lee is an African-American entrepreneur and certified financial planner. So he came at this from a couple of different angles. And the audience, which was primarily African-American, really related to him and related to his message because they saw themselves in him. And so I think that's important, to really deliver the message in a way that connects, because it's not an easy message to really get into the details on.
And that's why the messenger is so important.
Yep. Yeah, that's where I was going to. We use in our AARP en Español website, We have like a person, her name is Julie Stav. She specializes in finances in the Hispanic market, so we use her a lot to deliver that message in a way that people understand and they know her as a face. She's a financial person, and it's easier for her to get their attention and for her to relay the message.
We've got about 10 more minutes for questions, so time for 2 or 3 more.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you all for coming. I'm Scott Wagner. I'm with AARP in Kentucky. One of the questions that I've been thinking of for some time, we've been in the work and save business for about 1.5 to 2 years, but national organizations that we can partner with, and you were speaking of the national black churches, and I made a note of that, but if you could speak on a national level, who, you know, and I followed some of the work that SASE's put out with some of the partnering organizations, but who are they? Who are the national groups that we can connect with to better diversify our work and save campaign?
Right. Well, I would just offer a first thought, and that is that I'm delighted that AARP was able to convene this meeting in partnership with our colleagues, because it's the first meeting that I've ever been to on Work and Save that even talked about multicultural audiences or communities of color. And so I think we have some work to do, but we have some engaged partners here, as well as, I think, to Yvette's point, coming in not through traditional organizations, perhaps, but in unexpected ways. Though we did talk a little bit about chambers of commerce and employers that are communities, that serve communities of color. So thoughts about other national partners that we should think about?
Well, I'd say for Kentucky, one of our national partners is the National Federation of Filipino American Associations. And I do know that they have a presence in Kentucky because we sponsored their regional conference that was held in that Kentucky area. So we can put you in touch with, especially the Filipino community, but I can also find out who else from the Asian American community is in Kentucky and then help make those connections as well.
Yeah, in the Hispanic market, we have like 4 premier partners, in addition to other small ones that we work with throughout the year. But our charge is to do fewer, bigger, better. Work with bigger organizations that have a local impact so that we can do work throughout the year and not just sponsor a gala, sponsor a table, but really have them work for us, for the mission. So we work with NCLR, we work with LULAC, we work with LACLA, we work with the National Hispanic Council on Aging, amongst others, but those are like the 4 premier. And sometimes the local teams also come to us and tell us of the work that we're doing, and we'll also partner with them to drive whatever it is, whatever social mission it is that we're working on at that time.
I'd also say, also from the public sector side, there are not many, but there are about 15, whether at the governor's level or the mayoral level. There are like these commissions, like Yvette was on the Hispanic one here for Chicago, but there are Asian American commissions, governor's commissions or mayoral commissions, and those are made up of the leaders. They try to get a pan-ethnic diversity there, but also from all the different sectors as well too. So if your state, if your city, I think unfortunately Kentucky doesn't have, as far as I know, but those are very, very important access points into the community.
And I would add that from a civil rights standpoint, the NAACP and the National Urban League are both very much focused on economic empowerment. So I would definitely recommend the 2 of those organizations. Jackie Burton has already mentioned our work with the Conference of National Black Churches, and that's clearly a great partner. And then I would also just note on the next panel, we'll have Opportunity Finance Network, which is a group that we've really built out our partnership with this year. I won't steal your thunder, Lauren, but they've an association of over 200 community development financial institutions around the country that invest in multicultural communities. So definitely want to call out Opportunity Finance Network as another great partner.
Also, if your area is fortunate to have diverse elected or appointed officials, they're another great way to access the community as well.
Hi, I'm Tammy Bresnahan, and I'm from Maryland. And as Elaine and Jerry said, we are one of a couple of states who've passed the Work and Save legislation. And one of the things that we did was, I believe in this philosophy that all politics is local. And in Montgomery County, Maryland, about 50% of the population is made of multicultural communities, 18% Latino, 18% Black, about 14% AIPI. And one of the things that we did was we met with a woman who family had owned a Chinese restaurant in Montgomery County, and when we sat down and we spoke with her and told her about the bill and what it would do, she was like, well, my parents have owned this, I own it, and we never really thought that we could ever stop working, and this would give us an opportunity. She hooked us up with the whole Korean community that had a whole other set of small businesses in Montgomery Mall, and we worked Latino festivals with one of our delegates, Delegate Gutierrez, and we are lead spokesperson for the state. Our president, Tiger Davis, is a former legislator and a very trusted individual. So working on all three of those areas, we were able to get a diverse, very all politics local message to our elected officials, and I think that was what helped us pass the legislation. And moving forward, we will do the same thing.
Great. It sounds as if there are communities within communities within communities, and while it sounds a bit complex, it actually could be validators from one community to another in an authentic voice. And thank you, Tammy, for that. Other questions? We've got another question here. I'm just going to continue to go through lunch. That's not true.
Hi, my name is Lisa Wong with the Association of Chinese American Science Engineers and OCA, Organizing Chinese Americans. Just have a question. I mean, with all the minority groups, you kind of have two spectrums of financial standings. You have either the small business or also the college educated. How do you have the same message for both of them? Because they have different goals. They have different availability to invest in their retirement. I think you would have to have two type of messages. Is that right?
I think you really do, because yes, for the Asian American community, you've got the high and the low, right? And so we've got to have different messages, different messengers for each one of those, and so the strategies do need to be very different.
Yeah, I'd agree too for the Hispanic market, thinking of the multi-generational household, two different needs, from the college, people in college, the grandmas, the parents, all at different life stages, different levels of acculturation. So that's why I had mentioned earlier, know your audience. In a household, you may have to have different types of communication, different types of events to lure them for the same goal, but if you don't connect with them, understanding their life stage, it'll be harder to get the message across.
Yeah, and to your point about different messages, a couple of years ago, AARP did a segmentation analysis on the African American community, and a couple of the segments were segments that we called, we gave titles like hardworking hopefuls and stressed and struggling, and those were on the lower income side, and for those messages were more about aspirational thinking around finances, and saying that we recognize that you're not there yet, but there's hope if you take these steps, if you utilize these AARP resources or these programs. And then on the sort of upper end, there was a group called the Mainstream Movers that are already pretty accomplished financially, have had a strong career, and so the messaging there is slightly different. It's not so much about getting through a tough time. It's now that you've accomplished a lot of things in your career, how do we make sure that that extends into retirement or into the next phase of your career? So absolutely, I do think there are two different messages based on the situation.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
Yes.
I'm Richard Murdoch. I, not long ago, was state treasurer of Indiana, which causes me to say from across the state line and even from across the political spectrum, your Senator Biss here in Illinois is a remarkable guy. He's done a remarkable job. National leader, he really is. I have to say, Daphne, as I listened to your comments, I always thought I was Scotch-German, but I'm beginning to think I must have some Pacific Islander in me, given the language of discussion at my table when I grew up. But I've enjoyed the points of view regarding the various communities. And I offer this not as a criticism, but as a suggestion. Work and Save has one context. There was many comments about how messaging is important. As a former investment official, I would urge you to somehow say work, save, and invest.
Okay.
Ms. Pena mentioned that in the Latino community, a lot of people put money in the mattress. And I know that's true. One of the things I did as state treasurer was start a bank on program because we had so many people who weren't using any kind of financial thing. And yet, if you're just sticking money in the can and burying it in the alley or using the mattress, even if inflation stays at 2%, by the time you finish your working life, that money's in half the value of it. So, and final comment here, again, maybe suggestion, but to this lady's concern about having trust, I will tell you as a former state elected official, yes, I had people from your official lobbyist from AARP and every organization you can imagine come in and talk to me, but to have somebody who's working with the various communities, I trust you a lot more. And to the lady from Maryland's comment about all politics are local, I agree with that. So I hope that you use your specific individual resources to work with state legislators so that other states may do what you've done here. And Ms. Peña, I have to say, quiero ayudar y esperanza ayudar. So if I can be of service, please let me know.
Muy bien. Te llamaré.
This is where I leave the conversation. No, I'm struggling.
We're leave the conversation.
Well, great. Excelente. Please join me in thanking our great panel.
You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois.
Hi, I'm Dalitso Solomoyo, President of the Illinois Association of Community Action Agencies. We are an organization of 36 member agencies located around Illinois which provide needed services to our fellow citizens. It may be helping provide services at a homeless shelter or helping to provide affordable utilities to low-income people across Illinois through such programs as the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program, better known as LIHEAP, or working with rural communities and helping them maintain needed community infrastructure. These are just a few of the many services provided by Illinois' community action agencies. But to provide these services efficiently and effectively, we need solid information. That's why, in addition to heading the Illinois Association of Community Action Agencies, I am also proud to serve on the Illinois Channel's Advisory Council. I have watched the Illinois Channel for years. It provides serious coverage of the Illinois legislature, public policy discussions, and one-on-one interviews with leaders from across Illinois. It's the kind of solid, in-depth information all of us need to get beyond partisan politics and political spin and just hear directly what's happening, what's being proposed, and why. I know and you know that Illinois is filled with good people. But if we are to have good, effective public policies, we need to base those on good information. We get that from the Illinois Channel. That's why I watch it, and I hope you will too. The Illinois Channel, it works for all of us.
Next, we head to Scott Air Force Base for the ribbon-cutting ceremony of a national cybersecurity facility. Speakers include Governor Rauner and Senator Dick Durbin. This runs about 15 minutes.
Today, we celebrate a new facility, an expansion of this wonderful Air Force Base. This is one of the most important institutions in our protection of America's freedom anywhere in the world. Scott Air Force Base is an incredible institution. Thank you for your service here. Thank you for your leadership. This is about defending democracy, defending the principles of America, but it is also about creating more opportunity for the people of America. Jobs, technology, innovation, a dynamic local economy. That's what this facility does. It protects America. It creates opportunity for all Americans. It's a wonderful day. It shows what can be done when people at all levels of government, federal government, state government, local government, come together to work together to make our nation, our state, our community here in Metro East a better place. Thank you all. Let's celebrate today. God bless you.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Please welcome the Honorable Senator Dick Durbin.
Thank you very much. It is an honor to be here today. August in the Midwest. Growing up in East St. Louis, this is how I remember it, 100% humidity and 100 degrees, and turning on every fan we could possibly find, try to weather our way through it. And it's great to be here today and to face the weather challenge, but to do it in a very, very important event. I'm pleased to be with you to cut this ribbon today. I want to thank Lieutenant General Alan Lynn for being here from Fort Meade in Maryland. He has the daunting task of protecting the Pentagon's computer network from attack. That is a thankless job, not recognized by many, but one we will acknowledge today in a very important way. Thanks to Colonel Linderman, Colonel Kraft, Governor Runner, thank you for your kind words. To my former colleague and partner for so many years, Jerry Costello, and my current partner in elected office, St. Clair County Chairman Mark Kern, thank you for your continued leadership, and to all the elected officials from local communities who understand the importance of Scott Air Force Base, not just to our national security, but to our regional and local economy. This building has a complicated name, the Defense Information Systems Agency, Global Operations Command. Thank goodness we've decided to shorten it to DISA. And I'd like to reflect for a moment on why this building's important. The first reason is the work itself. It has national, even international implications. Each of us have stories that we've seen in the news about cybersecurity, about identity theft, about hacking, about those who hate America trying to invade our computer systems. Every day, these hackers and foreign governments do everything they can in the ongoing cyber war to find out the secrets of America and to undermine our national security. I've received many briefings in Washington, other members have as well, that demonstrated how talented and determined our enemies are. It is sobering. But General Lynn's task and Colonel Kraft's task right here at Scott Air Force Base is even more challenging. The Department of Defense is not walled off on some island. It operates globally. It works with other federal government agencies, with defense contractors, with foreign governments. So they're not guarding a solid wall, they're guarding a swinging door, making sure that the right folks can come in and out and the wrong ones are kept away every second of every day. That's a real challenge. DISA is not the only IT effort that we have in America, but right here at Scott Air Force Base, it's one of the most important. We have long hosted the Air Force's Network Integration Center. Last year, the Air Force also added 2 new cyber squadrons, the 835th Cyberspace Operations Squadron, the 837th Cyberspace Squadron. Each of these organizations perform critical defense for our military. We would be hard-pressed to be able to defend our allies and ourselves from attack from terrorists around the world without the agencies that are at work here at Scott Air Force Base and around the nation. Many of the critics and hand-wringers just go out and count the planes on the runway, and they wonder, what is the future of Scott? A few weeks ago, we dedicated the Visitor Center here to Alan J. Dixon. Dixon came out here as a high school student in Belleville. He came out to observe the blimps that were in the hangars here at Scott. Can you imagine when they said the blimps were leaving, that there weren't hand-wringers who said, well, that's the end of Scott Air Force Base as we know it? And yet we realize our national security threat is an evolving threat. We understand a hot war, and we have to be ready for it. With the fighters and the bombers and the supply aircraft, we will be ready. But there is a new war underway. It's a cyber war that goes on every second of every day, just as threatening to American security. And when you see this building, you may not see airplanes, but you're going to see a facility that is right smack dab in the middle of this cyber war, making sure that we have national prominence and that it comes right here to Scott Air Force Base. It was just a few years ago that I brought the Air Force Chief of Staff, Mark Welsh, out here to visit Scott. Senator Kirk was with me. We talked about the 126 Guards refueling mission, Transportation Command's global reach, Air Mobility Command headquarters, the 18th Air Force, DISA, and all the rest. And I put it directly to the Secretary. Can you name any other Air Force base with this importance, this much reach, this such a diverse headquarter operation? He said he couldn't do it. He's called Scott one of the top 3 bases in America. I didn't let him off the hook. I said, what's number 1? And he said, if you put me on the spot, it's Scott Air Force Base. Don't forget that. Don't forget that when you hear the critics question about the future of this base. The men and women who serve here and their leaders are doing an extraordinary job, recognized across the nation and around the world. This building has been built, $100 million commitment, not easy to come by in these days. Be ready. But there is a new war underway. It's a cyber war that goes on every second of every day, just as threatening to American security. And when you see this building, you may not see airplanes, but you're going to see a facility that is right smack dab in the middle of this cyber war, making sure that we have national prominence and that it comes right here to Scott Air Force Base. It was just a few years ago that I brought our Air Force Chief of Staff, Mark Welsh, out here to visit Scott. Senator Kirk was with me. We talked about the 126 Guards refueling mission, Transportation Command's global reach, Air Mobility Command headquarters, the 18th Air Force, DISA, and all the rest. And I put it directly to the Secretary. Can you name any other Air Force base with this importance, this much reach, such a diverse headquarter operation? He said he couldn't do it. He's called Scott one of the top 3 bases in America. I didn't let him off the hook. I said, what's number 1? And he said, if you put me on the spot, it's Scott Air Force Base. Don't forget that. Don't forget that when you hear the critics question about the future of this base. The men and women who serve here and their leaders are doing an extraordinary job, recognized across the nation and around the world. This building has been built, $100 million commitment, not easy to come by in these days, $100 million commitment to the future of Scott Air Force Base. It's a commitment which we take very, very seriously. I'll be spending a lot of time with military leaders in my job in Washington. They do what's necessary to keep America safe. And we're going to make sure that Scott Air Force Base is an integral part of that future. That's good for our country. That's good for Illinois. That's good for Scott Air Force Base. And it's an honor to be here today to cut the ribbon. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for those kind words. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor to welcome today's presiding officer, Lieutenant General Alan R. Lynn, Director of the Defense Information System.
Well, good morning. I'm glad it's so cool out today. At least that's mayors, flag officers, senior executive service leaders, distinguished guests, our great DISA team, family and friends. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to come here to this historic ribbon-cutting ceremony for the DISA Global Operations Command Building. It's a pleasure to be here to celebrate a significant milestone, a journey that has started over 10 years ago. Today's ribbon cutting marks the beginning of a new chapter of our Global Operations Command. This state-of-the-art facility is a reflection of our commitment to our employees, our mission, and the cyber defense of our nation. The most prominent detail of the facility is a 31,000 square foot global cyber operations center where highly talented Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, and DoD civilian professionals will conduct 24-hour, 7 days a week cyber operations, making it the largest of its kind in the Department of Defense. This project employed an average of 85 workers a day, the majority of which were made up of local labor. It is noteworthy that this project, led by the Army Corps of Engineers, with the support of our senators, congressmen, and mayors, was completed on time and under budget. Ladies and gentlemen, we have enemies, and they are capable adversaries, and they're out there right now trying to attack, disrupt, steal, and destroy our information and networks. We can't afford to blink or look away, not even for a second. In this building, our Global Operations Center will be the linchpin to building and defending the DoD networks. These networks support a range of military operations from support to the warfighter, forward deployed, and to strategic missions like nuclear command and control, or just the direct support to the Secretary of Defense and the President. This is why the building behind me is so important. From it, we build, secure, and defend the Department of Defense Information Networks, or DoDIN. one of the largest, most complex networks in the world, and one our adversaries highly prize as a target. DISA Global contributions to the cyber fight are unequaled. The men and women of DISA Global are crucial to ensuring our nation's warfighters have effective IT support and communications networks that are available, trusted, and operational at all times. Our nation can rest easy knowing DISA Global is at work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. To the hardworking men and women of DISA Global, you deserve a state-of-the-art facility to work in and collaborate in. Thank you for your commitment to excellence, your support, and your dedication to mission. Never forget that you directly enable the warfighter in the defense of this great nation. Cyber starts here. May God continue to bless DISA Global, our great military and civilian leaders, our great nation. Thank you.
No, I don't have a camera. So we do have a small amount of art that I'd like to just point out. This is actually the history of the Signal Corps and the history of communications, and it goes down the hallway. There's actually 3 murals. This mural is the history of IT, and of course it starts with the Army Signal Corps back in the day, more than 150 years ago.
This is an important step in defending America's freedom, defending democracy here in America and around the world. We are the greatest nation on earth because of the service of our military men and women in uniform. We're here to say thank you and God bless to them. And we're here to thank all the local officials, state officials, and federal officials who've come together to get this facility funded and open. It's $100 million, hard to come by in this tough economy and tough burden on taxpayers. But this facility will help expand our war on cyber attacks, cyber terrorism, and more effective communications for our military around the world using the internet. This will also create more jobs here in the state of Illinois and help drive innovation and technology here in Illinois and across the nation. Innovation, technology, creative uses of software and the internet will create many jobs in the future, and we want more of those jobs here in Illinois, so this is a great day, this ribbon cutting to celebrate.
Were you impressed by what you saw?
Very impressed, very impressed. This is a wonderful facility. It's created many new jobs, high-tech jobs, and it's expanded our capability to fight cyber attacks against America. So this is a wonderful facility.
The largest complex in the U.S. This has to be play a major role in Illinois as well.
Oh, it plays a major role not only for our national defense but also in Illinois' economy. This facility allowed us to bring together all the cyber security capability from the U.S. military from around the nation and around the world and concentrate it here in St. Clair County at Scott Air Force Base. Scott Air Force Base is one of the most important military institutions anywhere in the world. It's an honor for us here in Illinois to have it. We look forward to investing in it further and growing it.
Governor, how many jobs are at this facility?
He was saying earlier that there are 1,015 folks based inside this particular facility, and they're looking to expand.
And about what percentage of those are civilian versus?
I'd have to get the exact percentage. I don't want to give you the wrong number. It's a mix of obviously armed services personnel, uniform, as well as civilians. You know, that's my number one priority as governor, is to create an environment for manufacturing firms to expand in Illinois. We need to reduce the regulatory burden, the tax burden, and we have been the heart of manufacturing in America here in Illinois, and we want to bring that back. So we're doing everything we can. Last year and this year, my first 2 years as governor, I fought to increase state support for education. We are the worst in America for funding our schools. I fought for more money last year than actually the General Assembly was even willing to give me. Demanded more money this year. We got more money. And we want to put more money into our school system every year. We want the best schools in every community, in every neighborhood, anywhere in America, right here in the state of Illinois. We need more school support, and that's what I've worked to get accomplished.
The Illinois Channel salutes our advisory council members.
Hello, I'm Michael Jacoby, Executive Director of the Illinois Association of School Business Officials. Most people never look at a school and think of it being an economic enterprise that spends tens of millions of dollars every year. They look at the school as a place their children attend for education, or perhaps as a place to attend a local sporting event. But handling the business of education is the job of the school business officials. We're the ones that keep track of the millions of dollars that come in and go out. Our members face a myriad of issues. that include financing new buildings, paying teachers and staff, tracking our pension costs, and supervising the many businesses that contract with local schools. And that's why I'm so happy to serve on the Illinois Channel Advisory Council. The Illinois Channel connects us with legislators working on educational issues in the state capitol, as well as covering educational issues being discussed at conferences around the state. As we see in the debate over pensions, the many details involved in just that one issue, we need a news organization that's willing to give enough time to cover an important issue in depth. I'm Michael Jacoby, Executive Director of the Illinois Association of School Business Officials. I'm also proud to serve on the Illinois Channel's Advisory Council. The Illinois Channel, it keeps us connected to the issues that matter most.